Today is about being. It's not about thinking. It's not even really about doing. Today is about being present, about being mindful, about connecting and collecting, connecting with our bodies, connecting with possibly our emotions, connecting with each other. And it's also about learning particular techniques that you can carry into your daily life, and that will, the way I feel, that will osmosisly, by you taking on this practice, it will naturally ripple out into your work environment, your home environment. This is what I have found to be true. Okay, so mindfulness equals distress tolerance. We talked quite a bit about distress tolerance yesterday, and this idea of that actually there might be some distress tolerance in the room, or at least some distress in the room right now. The idea that things are a little bit different, that I've kind of front loaded. We're going to turn off our phones. We're going to focus on the here and now, being present. That might cause some anxiety, and I just want to honor that. That's not uncommon for any type of these types of situations. That's not uncommon. So I want to just go over what we're going to do today, okay? And I really understand you guys in the back can't see. And I'm just going to read through them, or maybe you can. Can you see at all? No. All right. So the experiential practice is our focus today, and the experiential practice. So grounding in the present moment. That's going to be kind of one of the main themes. Grounding in the present moment. This body awareness. We're going to kind of spend the morning really working on grounding, body awareness. Super helpful for any kind of distress. Especially if it's on emotional, catastrophizing, kind of flooding of emotion, being able to ground first yourself and then your patients or clients is extremely helpful. Maybe the most helpful thing. All right. One of the things that I had the privilege of doing is actually teaching mindfulness and mindfulness-based stress reduction to severe and persistent people that suffer from severe and persistent mental illness. So we're talking schizophrenia, we're talking severe bipolar, all across the board, right? Schizoaffective, and the grounding exercises and the heart exercises were the most effective. Actually, the kind of breathing or some of the visualization or the different kind of stuff that some of the other modalities use actually found it to not be helpful. Grounding, body-centered awareness, and this idea of loving kindness, extremely effective. And I did that in several different venues with several different populations, but similar severe and persistent mental illness. So I'm not sure if you guys are working with severe and persistent mental illness, but I found this to be a really helpful modality. And also to keep myself regulated while working with someone with like schizoaffective disorder, where it's up and down and it's in and out of psychosis or depression or mania. It's just always kind of changing and very challenging. Yeah. So, yeah. Okay. Eating meditation. We're gonna do some mindful eating, some understanding of mindful eating, and. So more will be revealed on that. I'll talk about it later, kind of towards lunch. And then so mindfulness of breathing. Mindfulness of breathing it's always with us, right? Mindfulness of breathing. We always have a breath from our birth date to our death date. Mindful movement. So we're going to do this in a couple different ways. One of the reasons why I wanted the room to be this way is because we're going to do some more of that weird stuff we did yesterday called Qigong. Qigong is mindful movement. It means energy and movement. Qi, energy, movement, Gong. So Qigong, we'll do some of that later. maybe some standing yoga. Mindfulness of feeling tones, that's another thing we're going to be focusing on. So we talked about pleasant, unpleasant, neutral yesterday. Pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. So we're going to be working with that as well. So the kind of getting into the experiential quality of that. Walking meditation, I haven't quite figured out how to do walking meditation here, outside, inside, both. I don't know, we'll figure that one out later. But I want to give you guys a little bit of understanding around that. Some dyads, we're going to be breaking up into small groups of 2s and 3s and doing a couple dyads. That is really about connection. And from the DBT's perspective, it's about kind of understanding communication and skillful or effective communication. So, and then kind awareness. So kind awareness is actually a whole series of practices that we're going to be talking about that has to do with the mind, and the heart. So this mind-heart connection, and has compassion and kindness, some what's called equanimity or balance. We'll be getting into that today as well. Appreciative joy. And then mindfulness of mind. Mindfulness of mind. Maybe we'll get into that. You'll definitely touch into some of it today. Mindfulness of mind is a little bit more of an advanced technique, but I'm sure it's possible. This seems like a very advanced room, so I think we'll be able to handle that. Yeah. Okay. So I think that's a good place to just kind of stop there for now, and let's get started. Mm-hmm.
Now it is.
Speak up a little bit, please.
It's more meaningful now.
More painful.
Meaningful.
Meaningful. Oh, okay. Go ahead. More meaningful. Yes. Could you say more about that? More like what do you mean by more meaningful?
Meaningful is before I was stressing out about it. Now I'm kind of trying to make it. Trying to use it in my own life.
Yes.
I'm trying to make it as meaningful to relax, calm my body. And not just before I was too critical.
There's the kind of two types, right? There's the I have to be perfect all the time, or I know I'm never going to be perfect, so I'm resigning to be the most unperfect. I was the other side. I was the unperfect. Right. So, but both are painful. Both have their root in this idea of perfection as being the goal, yet it's never reached. And so mindfulness and this concept of, form by its very nature is imperfect, is a way of allowing us to relax a little bit, to settle into that there's more meaning that we can have just in the moment. And it doesn't mean that we don't do the best we can. A lot of what DBT is too is lowering the hypervigilance around perfection or imperfection. So just think about that for yourself. This idea of form by its very nature is imperfect. What comes up for you about that? Any thoughts? What forms can you see are imperfect? Any ideas? The family unit, yeah. Although from the outside, the idea is we're supposed to be perfect. Yeah? At least I was kind of raised that way. We have some rigid beliefs sometimes. Yeah. Keeping family secrets, even though there's all kinds of stuff maybe happening. Yeah. So right, please.
For me, I know with clients, a lot of times people are constantly comparing themselves to that ideal or the socially accepted ideal or
Sure.
each other, and I'm not good enough because this person is better for A, B, or C reasons. So the angle I usually try to take with it is kind of like, every single person is unique, everybody's different, and everybody has their role. So in that sense, you're not less than or imperfect, you're just different, and everybody's different, and there's value in that.
Right. So value and difference, just to kind of, I'm going to say not only for the camera, but for other people who couldn't hear, this idea of comparison, and it's actually, it's a really huge issue here, this comparing insides with others' outsides, or others' outsides to others' outsides, even though, and where there's this a vast amount of difference. And one of my colleagues likes to say, we all got gifts. Everyone in this room has a gift, or maybe several. And so instead of judging one gift from another gift, just own your gift. And that's actually part of the diversity. That's part of what makes what you're doing helpful, right? Because you're going to be able to work with some patients, some clients, and then other people you're not going to be able to work with, but other people will. So great, thank you. Yeah, I think of family, I think of government, I think of the planet itself. I think of this body, I think of all these bodies. They're so not perfect, right?
I have a comment. In terms of like expectations, I think that that also can create conflict and a lot of stress, because if we have very high expectations of ourselves or others, sometimes that's just our personal beliefs or things that we want us or others to achieve. So when that changes, or when those expectations are not met, then we get disillusioned by the idea of that expectation that we have, and then it starts to create conflict, depression, anxiety, because others cannot do what we expect them to do, or why I didn't reach that person's expectation. So it's difference between expectation and goals.
Yes.
So I think that a goal we can set step by step of how to get there, and the expectation is just the idea of what the outcome of what we want it to be.
So the idea of having expectations, there's one kind of statement or euphemism that gets used a lot. Expectation is preconceived resentment, right? So the idea of, as we set these expectations, different than planning, and that planning is necessary, is helpful. We need to have some kind of goal, setting a goal so that we can have some amount of movement, striving forward, something to focus on, something to have be a compass point. But to let go of the expectation, because expectation is going to cause conflict within ourselves and with others, especially if we have expectations on others, expectations on our clients. Right? We may have some goals, right? Goal setting, goal planning.
The education system.
Yeah, the educational system. So the idea is it's not flawed. It's just not perfect. And letting go of the idea of perfection, it's a huge, I think for some people, just the idea of letting go of perfection it's counterintuitive. But I'd like to ask you to try it on for a year. See what happens. Just try on the idea of, not perfect. Doesn't mean I'm not going to do my best. Doesn't mean I'm not going to show up every day and do my best. What it does mean, this idea of holding to an unreachable standard.
It is got a really good statement about that.
What's that?
Progress, not perfection.
That's right. Progress, not perfection. Right? One of the key elements of Alcoholics Anonymous 12-step philosophy. Yeah.
I think that goes with the government. I said it's not perfect, but they strive for perfection.
Mm-hmm.
They have certain expectations for the employees, and then they kind of went with what Marie was saying. You have those goals, and to attain those goals, that's perfection for them.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean? And those goals, government, they set really high goals because they don't want you to get complacent. Mm-hmm. And so that kind of that messes with people too, because they're like, I have to be perfect, I have to get there, I have to do my job.
This is why we have so much stress and anxiety in this culture, in the American culture, because that's the way it's always been. Right? Yet it's like a false dichotomy. And I don't want to get too much into the kind of sociology and socio-cultural kind of system, but actually bring it back to individuals, because that's actually what I'm thinking about talking about. But it is, the concept that I put out there was form by its very nature is imperfect. Show me a perfect system. Show me a perfect system that isn't flawed in some way, that doesn't have some anomalies that take place. All right. Okay, good. So I wanted to just kind of put that out there, and I wanted to bring back this concept, but in another way, around the effectiveness of meditation and how mindfulness practice changes the brain. So we looked at this another way before, but so this idea of thank you, whoever turned that off. The idea of beta waves, this is the kind of alert state where we're mostly taking in, we're kind of multitasking, we're doing things throughout our day, we're busy, we're driving, we're making phone calls, we're just interacting in our day, right? Our kind of hyper alert state also is another way of thinking about it. This alpha state, the alpha wave is that kind of spacey state where we're calming down. We may feel some calmness, but it's state dependent. So it's really kind of based only on the practice that we're doing, and it's actually not about deeper relaxation and not about insight. And so, and then a lot of times that's actually the avoidance stage, the checking out. So the reason, like there was a question the other day about visualization, guided visualizations, and listening to kind of music, and how, like, is that recommended in this mindfulness? And I generally say no, although I said explore for yourself. Because the danger is that we could be kind of checking out of experience, and so much of what mindfulness is, it's about checking in. About checking into our internal state, about being connected to our external state, and not dissociated. Really. But with that being said, sometimes, as with DBT, sometimes learning to just distract or avoid for a period of time while the crisis settles can be very helpful. And what I want to be really clear about is that I have a particular lens. I said this in the beginning. And my lens is that mindfulness is overall helpful. And then using other modalities is also helpful. Right? So trauma-informed psychotherapy, psychiatry, the medical profession. I mean, there's so many kind of, elements, right? So the more tools you have, the more tools you can utilize. Mindfulness, to me, is a very helpful one. And I think it actually augments just about every other treatment modality. So this next level, the theta level, so you're seeing there's a slowing down of the brain activity, right? And so what's happening in this is that we're actually going to be receiving some calm experiences. Possibly that happened to you yesterday. You were able to maybe move into some theta experience where there was some sustained calm. Not thinking. Mindfulness isn't about not thinking. Mindfulness is about allowing the body to be less reactive, allowing the mind to be more responsive. And at some point, thoughts might actually slow down because of what we're choosing to focus on. And then I have to get a new pointer. This one has way too many buttons. And then, so this last is the delta waves. So theta is your kind of optimum 20-minute meditation practice, of 20 minutes of sustained practice. The idea of doing that repeatedly, you're able to get into what's called theta. When you're doing longer, sustained, either individual meditation, like 45 minutes, or repetitively, which was kind of part of the goal yesterday, was to kind of do repetitive, so you'll kind of notice that there's more available if we can keep going, and then there's actually some of that tension settles down. So what's called the delta waves are actually where one is kind of is having access to insight, or what can be called deep calm. And sometimes this deep calm is actually energizing. So there's actually, this is where that idea of like a power nap can be helpful, when we're not fully sleeping, but we're allowing ourselves to just let go of the busyness, and then maybe re-engage. I also was talking about that in terms of Einstein's epiphany. Right, so that's another way of kind of looking at that. So I just wanted to kind of point out some of these brainwave patterns, and the other, just another lens that we're looking through. So I'm going to move on. There's a blue sky. One of the things that I actually like to do is, well, there's two aspects. One is around perception, right? So perception tells us that this is a blue sky. But is the sky blue? The sky is not actually blue. Yet we perceive it as blue. Right? We perceive the sky as blue. So this is one of the things that we call it like a distorted perception. Because it's not blue in the nighttime. And it's not blue all the time. Right? So it's actually the reflection of the ocean that allows us to have a blue sky. And it's a beautiful thing. But it's a distorted perception. This is one of those things I like to think about. And so sometimes I also think about when we're meditating, we're allowing thoughts to be like clouds moving through our experience. So it's kind of like, so I use this, and maybe we'll do a little later, this kind of big sky or blue sky meditation practice where the spaciousness, the awareness of the sky, and then actually what's going through our experience, what's moving through our awareness is sometimes it's harsh weather. Sometimes it's rainy clouds, sometimes it's tornadoes, sometimes it's lightning and thunder. And sometimes it's clear with a slight breeze. Right? So, but it's always changing. And that's an important piece. It's one of the important pieces in de-escalation of overwhelming emotion, of emotional dysregulation, this idea of that which arises passes away. It's a very important concept. All right, so I wanted to go over the aims of practice. We went over it a little bit yesterday, but I want to go over a little bit more today in a little bit more detail. So the idea of developing mindfulness of the body and breath for something like 10 or 15 minutes a day is what we're talking about. So taking 10, 15 minutes out of your day and practicing. This just whether it's breath, like I've given you the instructions. You actually have all the instructions now. I've given you the instructions of just simply following the breath. Breathing in, know that you're breathing in. Breathing out, know that you're breathing out. Or sustained body awareness, right? Sweeping through the body, finding places of tension, relaxing, softening, letting be sometimes. Sometimes we can actually, some things like chronic pain, we actually can't get rid of. But can we let be without putting an extra layer of suffering on top of it? That's the key with working with chronic pain. One of the things that I've done both in myself, because I have some chronic pain, but then also working with patients and clients, is, okay, so there's a place where there's some pain or agitation in the body. And the mind's tendency is to go right there and actually focus on it, as if that's going to make it better. But it actually doesn't. It actually exacerbates it, makes it worse. Right? It blows it up, catastrophizes the situation sometimes. And so the idea is like, okay, can I shift? This is the body scan that we did yesterday. Can I shift my attention to another part of the body where it's actually maybe there's pleasant sensation? And then we're able to have a shift in perspective. So to be able to identify the experience of feeling as pleasant, unpleasant, or neither. So as positive or pleasant, as unpleasant, or as neutral, neither pleasant or unpleasant. So the ability to identify this is crucial in emotional well-being, and we're just going to gain insight into how we are often, we're kind of ruled or led by our reactivity before we're even cognitively aware of it. And this is with the sensitivity that we can build can be really helpful. So being able to discern the primary feeling as emotional, bodily, or mentally, right? As emotional, as found in the body, or as mental. So this distinction, again, it's around using the awareness to be able to discern what's happening, where is it happening, and then utilizing the proper technique. If we don't know, we're just overwhelmed, or we're just disconnected, then we actually there's nowhere we can go, right? So the idea of learning to have this tool, like I found that anxiety and the beginning of anger, like frustration, it's pretty much in my core, and there's a tightness in my core. And then somewhere it shifts. So this is just my own practice. Anxiety tends to rise up towards my throat, and anger tends to go down towards my belly, and I start to tighten my belly as like armoring or protecting in some way. So these are like this body awareness practice, and then noticing, okay, well, what's going on mentally? Sometimes if I'm aware of the mental aspects of it, I realize I've become foggy in my mind. I can't think clearly. Okay, so what can I do around this thing? So applying these different practices, which we're going to go over some of them today. We're going to work on some of them today. So learning how to access difficult and challenging emotions without reaction. So this, I think, is so helpful with mindfulness and the mindfulness-based stress reduction, because the idea of, can I allow observation? Can I have a little bit of space so I'm not so enmeshed? But can I allow a little bit of space, right, between the stimulus and the response? There's space. So this idea of oftentimes we're just a mesh of what's happening. And so if we can have some space, then we can have a little bit more of an objective view. One of the things I write about in my book is that awareness of anger isn't anger. Awareness of anger isn't anger itself. It's the awareness of. So if we're able to have some objective distance from our emotional states, then we're actually able to see them with a little bit more objectivity, and then create hopefully a more kind of positive response instead of habitually reacting, which is what we're conditioned to do. Or we're conditioned to habitually underreact. That's the other side of the equation. Just a little bit, like, because of my childhood and the way I was raised, hypervigilance is something that I learned very young, and underreactivity. So in other words, I would be hyper aware, but not letting anyone know how stressed or anxious I was, because that would cause undue attention, unwelcome attention. So this was the way I built these strategies up in my life. And they've actually been pretty helpful for me in a lot of ways, as I've learned to utilize them. And to not have it be such a reaction, but a response. So something that I'm able to see objectively. So this is just one small example. I'm sure everyone here, if you're able to kind of really evaluate and look at, that's what's happening. That's what's been happening. This has been my tendency. My causes and conditions. can be pretty helpful. So developing a tolerance towards the unpleasantness of mind, body, and emotion. So this is so important. I've talked about this, I think I talked about it the other day. You know, from the addiction standpoint, we're addicted to comfort in this country. But really, in the world, we have an addiction to comfort. Although there are some unique, I've traveled a little bit, but there are some unique differences that we are addicted to comfort because the idea of discomfort, we actually can do something about, for the most part, at least temporarily. The physical discomfort, like, buy a more comfortable car, or have a big comfortable mattress, or, like this kind of thing. We have some opportunities. Have air conditioning, exactly. Have chairs to sit in. We've been tolerating these particular chairs, that's right. Yeah. But the idea that developing some tolerance to discomfort is necessary for our survival. It's necessary for our well-being. Because otherwise we get used to, that's where we get into the addictive cycle of seeking comfort all the time. We're a quick fix society. Oh, I don't feel right. I need to do this, do that. Change this, change that. It's not a judgment. It's just an observation. And what mindfulness allows us to do, and this is a little bit what I was doing yesterday, right, in the day long, I was providing a little discomfort for you, in case you didn't have enough, right? Asking you to have periods of silence and not looking at your cell phones or, eating mindfully. So this is all part of the mindfulness, fundamentals, the basic approaches, which it's kind of like instead of a circle, it's a spiral. So the more that we do these simple practices, the more is revealed. More will be revealed.
What is the perspective of mindfulness in pharmacology?
I can't really speak on that because I don't feel like I have enough. I can give you my opinion, but the mindfulness, there's so many. So the question was, what is the mindfulness perspective on pharmacology, on mindfulness and pharmacology? So what I can say is that, where I work in a hospital that primarily deals with co-occurring disorder, so mental health. Actually, sometimes it's triple disorders, right? We're having medical issues like diabetes, alcoholism, anxiety, depression. We work very closely with the psychiatrist and the MD and the therapist. Primarily, so I'm teaching coping skills mindfully. They're seeing the psychiatrist and getting evaluated for other pharmacological options, and then they're seeing the MD to be also just monitoring all of the medical issues, medical problems, and the interactions. So I think, like I said earlier, mindfulness can augment just about any modality of treatment. I'm not sure how, by and large, the psychiatric profession really views mindfulness, but there's quite a few psychiatrists here today, so that's helpful. I think generally people are open to the idea of mindfulness and this idea of dialectical behavioral therapy as well. One, because it's evidence-based. So scientifically kind of studied, research. Yeah. But as far as what is the overall mindfulness perspective, I couldn't answer that. That would be not helpful for me to answer that. But it was a great question. I appreciate the question. All right. Do one more slide, and then we'll take a quick break. Yes.
I can. So specifically on the pharmacology and mindfulness, I don't know how you can directly study the two together, but even the idea of taking a pill has a psychological component to it. And so we have something called the placebo effect, which is sometimes very high, to the point that you start wondering whether it's just the idea of taking the medicine that's causing the benefit. And the placebo effect is significant at times. So,
I agree. I've seen I don't know if it's placebo or not, but I've seen the effect of like giving something like, say, Buspar or gabapentin to someone with high anxiety who was addicted to Klonopin or Ativan for years, and their anxiety was a lot of it was psychological and was withdrawal, and they were giving this other medication, and then given also some mindfulness techniques, and they rapidly had some change.
and so probably I think at some point they're shifting away from the pill to the idea that I'm taking the pill, and that makes it mindful.
Yeah, I would agree. I appreciate your comments. Thank you. But I also want to say that I don't think we just can't. So this is one psychiatrist's opinion, one mindfulness teacher's opinion. You know what I mean? So the larger, there's a lot of different opinions. Yeah.
There's a lot of conflict.
There's a lot of conflict. Yeah. There's a lot of conflict out there. I appreciate, actually, one of the things I appreciate about this training in this area is that there are so many different people here. So many from like different kind of professional levels of case managers and licensed therapists and social workers and psychiatrists and educators. Yeah, I know probation officers. I don't know, a couple lawyers perhaps. Yes.
I just want to comment on the thing that use of medicine or pharmacology. It's sometimes we have to use combination of everything, and we have to, that's our evaluation of the person to see what fits for somebody. There will be some people, for them only mindfulness might work, and then if that doesn't work, then we have to go to another modality to see. And but what works best is like something combination of everything works.
Yeah.
So seem like spirituality for some people is so important, and that works best. And faith-based programs for some people it's perfectly fit. For some people it doesn't work at all. They don't want to even listen to the areas of interest which we sometimes are very powerful.
Yeah.
But it's just the same. Like we have to be open-minded and see what fits for everybody. I mean, for different people, it's going to fit different things.
And I feel like it's really important, actually, that's what I consider a client-centered approach. So really, I want to know what my client has tried, what has worked, especially when they're in that place of stability. I like to ask them, what's worked for you in the past? And how can we encourage that again? Oh, well, when I was going to those AA meetings, and when I was working out regularly, and when I was taking my medication, my life, I could hold a job, and I, this, that, the other thing. Oh, well, so that's wisdom. Let's tap into your own wisdom, your own knowledge, and then help you get there. All right, so let's move on. So again, just talking about how I feel like mindfulness is the kind of center of all of the rest of these kind of symptom reduction mindfulness can be used as this tool. It's not the only tool, but it's the main tool that I'm prescribing today, right? And I just feel like it's very helpful. And maybe some of you even noticed some of this yesterday, I don't know. The relieving of chronic pain, so we just talked about that a little bit ago, right? So initially, actually, if we're learning to be more mindful, we're going to what? Notice our chronic pain more, right? Just like we're going to notice our mental distress more, our emotional distress more. And then some of the initial response is to avoid, right? Or distract. And we're actually saying keep going with this practice. So what I'd like is for everyone to open up your handbook and find the mindfulness 2. So there's a few sections. There's the blue section is I tried to make them all blue actually, but it didn't work out. It didn't translate. So mindfulness 2. It's about 15, 20 pages in. Then it says core mindfulness skills. Let me know when you're there. Okay, so if you're there, then there's the next page over, and it says observing and describing thoughts. Back. And then the next page over, it says DBT, non-judgmental mindfulness skills. It's also considered page 17 on the that may or may not be helpful.
You said non-judgmental? Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Yes, it's non-judgmental. So what I'd like for you to do is fill this form out. Just take a few minutes. And before we do that, we're just going to do a little mindfulness practice, okay? So just being comfortable. You don't have to get any position. Just allowing the eyes to close for a moment. Thinking of this concept formed by its very nature is imperfect. And then beginning to reflect on some of the ways that we might judge ourselves. Okay. All right, does anyone want to share anything out to the whole group about that process? Not specifics, and of course, always about your own experience, not about other people's experiences. So we're going to and when we have these little small breakouts, the idea is that sometimes people don't feel comfortable speaking out in the whole group. So I want to provide opportunities for other ways of connecting in the small group or partners. So please only speak about your own experience. Please.
Some of them seem to come from very deep-seated past experience. But even though you constantly are trying to cast it away, it comes back.
Let me just say that out to the rest of the group. So, I'm sorry, I forgot your name. What Peter's talking about is that some of the judgments that he was aware of come from maybe deep-seated or old, like childhood experiences or old conditioning. Yeah. Anything else that you're aware of? Just that? That's huge. I mean, it really is huge that we are so conditioned by our parents, by our culture, by our childhoods, by our early peers, by our early learning, by our early attachment styles. Huge. Have you guys done any attachment theory training or attachment style training? Super helpful. Yes.
Can you elaborate more on that? I kind of don't. I've never.
So I can just say a few words about it. Like, so attachment theory is there's two ways of looking at it. One is the primary caregiver and the attachment style that the baby has with the primary caregiver, and then the other way of looking at that. And there's different temperaments, right? And like whether there's a secure attachment, avoidant attachment, insecure attachment. There's different kind of different styles, attachment styles. There actually is a really great book called Attached that is about how does those early attachment styles affect us now in relationships and who we choose and who we're repulsed by. And so some of these form our early kind of judgments.
I think Bruce Perry did a writing about the attachment.
Is that right? Yeah, there's a lot of really great. I think the original was Bowlby was the original kind of creator of the attachment theory psychology, and actually I think it was Freud's daughter too, right? Anna Freud, yeah.
I did the study with the white monkey, the white bunny.
Was it a white bunny? Yeah, I don't. Like I said, I don't know enough about the in-depth theory, but just that there's a lot that's coming from there. Yeah, and our early attachment styles has a lot to do with how we walk in the world.
So I guess that's kind of my dilemma because one son was born while I was deployed, and the other son was born when I was here. So that's kind of my struggles with attachment because I feel it, even though I love them equally,
Sure.
but the attachment is different, and so I struggle. Like I don't want to fall short from not loving more, but I mean loving differently. Mm-hmm. And so the judgment part of me is like both my parents were present when I was born, and my twin, and so it's a new way of like I don't know how to raise them in a way, like in the sense that I don't know how to like if I say something to one, did I mean it more for him or did I mean it for the other? Or so that's when you said attachment, that's why I rang a bell. Like that's why I wanted you to elaborate more because it's kind of a show that
The main thing I think for people who've been deployed is missing out on those developmental stages.
Exactly.
Where you kind of connect in a different way.
So when the second son was born, my wife was like, really, like, hey, you should do that, like, the bonding thing, like take off your shirt and then like hug him without a shirt. I was like, what do you mean take off my shirt? Hug him without a shirt. I'm kind of like prickly. Like I don't like they're so like soft. So I was like, I don't know. So I guess that's a form of the attachment, I guess. And I didn't have that with my first son, so it's kind of. I got back from deployment and my wife was like, here's your son. I'm like, what do you do with this dude? He's crying on me. Like, you go. What do you do with him?
You know what I really appreciate about you? That you really talk from your heart. And that you actually allow yourself to be vulnerable in a huge group of people.
And so I tell people as a veteran, most veterans, you know, they're close. I have an uncle, he's a Vietnam veteran. He's better he's bitter. And how it copes with me, with my struggles, is like I like to talk, and the people who know me, they know I love to talk, and I'm really outgoing, outspoken person. And if you don't know me, you kind of already know me by now.
I think we're getting to know each other. So here's the thing I'd like to say to you around that, just specifically around that particular question. The piece is around now, like how can you be there now, and how can we actually develop forgiveness for ourselves around our judgments and around our circumstances that we couldn't control. Right. So how do we develop forgiveness? Which we're going to talk a little bit more about forgiveness later. So
I apologize again if I.
No, it's okay.
I have one observation. In terms of judgment towards others, I kind of put like self-centered people, like, that's like a judgment that I catch myself doing. So talking about it, I kind of realized that it's my collectivist view of how I was raised, that if I see someone being self-centered, for me, I'm not able to relate to it because I grew up in an environment of collectivism, like family, society, so that was a realization for me right now, like where that comes from.
Yeah.
So there's nothing wrong with it, but it's just my view, and that's
Well, it's not necessarily that there's anything wrong with any of our judgments, but the question I have is, do they get in the way of our effectiveness?
Yeah.
That's the question. Not whether it's right or wrong, because it is what it is, right? But is it useful? And is it getting in the way of our effectiveness in our ability to work with people, or to be friends with people, or to connect with people, right? I think that's the question. Anyone from the back of the room, or from the middle of the room, or we have some outspoken front folks.
Sorry.
How about you, bro?
Why not?
I just want to provide opportunity for anyone else that hasn't really spoke up, just to talk about what came up for you during this. I guess there's reasons people sit in the back. Okay. There's a lot of ideas about how I can get the rest of the group to participate, but I'm going to ignore them. and I'm going to allow people to have their own experience, because that's helpful.